The people gossiping about you right now are not actually your problem. Your reaction is. Most people think office gossip dies when you defend yourself, correct the story, or confront the person spreading it. It does not work that way. And if you have already tried explaining yourself, I need you to hear this carefully, because you may have made it worse without realizing it. The real way gossip dies is quieter than that. It has almost nothing to do with proving anyone wrong. And what I am about to show you is the part most people never figure out. I'm Dre. I've spent enough time sitting close to management conversations, HR conversations, and the kind of team meetings where reputations get built or quietly buried to know that gossip is not just noise. It is a system. Nobody names it out loud. Nobody writes it down. But it runs in almost every office, and it decides more about how people are treated than most performance reviews do. So let's start with the obvious question. Is gossip actually a real threat to you? Or is it just people being bored and petty? Here's the honest answer. Yes, this is real, but not in the way people think. Gossip is not usually a coordinated attack. Nobody is sitting in a room plotting against you. What's actually happening is simpler and in some ways worse, because it means you can't out-argue it. Gossip fills a vacuum. When people don't have real information about a situation, they invent one. If you got moved off a project with no explanation, if you had a closed-door meeting nobody talked about, if you got quiet after a hard week, that silence becomes raw material. People don't gossip because they hate you. They gossip because nobody gave them a better story, so they built one out of whatever they could see. Let's say someone gets pulled into a manager's office for 20 minutes and comes back to their desk a little quieter than usual. Nobody else in that office actually knows what was said. Maybe it was a routine check-in. Maybe it was something completely unrelated to them. It doesn't matter, because within an hour, 2 or 3 different versions of what probably happened are already moving around. That's not malice. That's just what people do when there's a gap and nothing official to fill it. Which means, functionally, staying quiet about your own situation and gossip about your situation are not opposites. Silence is often exactly what creates the gossip in the first place. Here's where people make it worse without realizing it. The instinct, when you hear something is being said about you, is to correct it. Publicly, if you have to. Pull someone aside, deny it, explain the real version, maybe even bring it up in a meeting so everyone hears the truth. I understand the impulse, but functionally, that move usually backfires. When you respond hard to a rumor, you are telling every person watching that this rumor matters enough to you to fight over. And people read effort as guilt, even when there is none. I've personally seen versions of this play out the same way almost every time. The person who stays calm gets forgotten faster than the person who gets loud about being falsely accused. That is not fair. I am not saying it's fair. I am saying that is how it reads to the room. So if defending yourself backfires, what actually works? This is the part almost nobody teaches, because it feels counterintuitive. Gossip needs fuel. It needs new material, new reactions, new drama to stay alive. The moment you stop giving it anything new, it starts to starve. Not because people suddenly feel bad for spreading it, because there's nothing left to talk about. Someone who keeps showing up normal, keeps doing their job, doesn't flinch in meetings, doesn't over-explain themselves at the coffee machine, gives the story nothing to attach to. Boring is not losing. Boring is how you win this. I know that sounds anticlimactic. It is supposed to. The real move here is not clever. It's restraint. And restraint is harder than people expect. because every instinct in your body is telling you to explain yourself. But there's a second system running underneath all of this, and it matters just as much as the gossip itself. While the story is spreading through the office, someone else is quietly watching how you're handling it. And that's the part people almost never think about. Managers rarely step in and referee gossip directly. Most of them will tell you they stay out of it. But in systems I've worked with, they are absolutely noticing something else. They're noticing who creates disruption and who absorbs it. They're noticing who escalates a situation and who just keeps working through it. And here's the uncomfortable part. That observation tends to outlast the gossip itself. The original rumor fades in a few weeks. Nobody remembers the specifics by the next quarter, but how they handled it becomes an informal character note that sticks around a lot longer than the incident that created it. I've seen two people get tangled up in the exact same rumor, and a year later, they're remembered completely differently. Not because of what was said about them, because of what they did in response. Now, I want to be careful here, because I don't want this to sound like I'm blaming the person the gossip is about. Some of this is genuinely unfair. Some gossip is targeted, biased, tied to who someone is rather than anything they actually did. I'm not telling you that staying quiet means the situation was deserved. Staying quiet is a strategy, not a verdict. You can be completely innocent and still benefit from not feeding the story. Those two things are not in conflict. This does not prove anything about who was right. It's just how the internal read tends to work. I also want to be honest about the double standard here, because it's real and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. Companies do this too. Managers talk about employees behind closed doors constantly. Favoritism gets decided in conversations you'll never be part of. People get quietly written off based on someone else's opinion of them, with no chance to respond. I know that. I'm not defending it, but knowing what happens on the company side doesn't change what happens on yours. And I'm telling you what actually protects you inside a system that was never going to be perfectly fair to begin with. Which brings up the part almost nobody actually talks about. Who is spreading this in the first place? And why does it keep circulating? Here's the boring truth. And the boring truth is usually worse than the conspiracy people imagine. It is not the whole office talking about you. It rarely is. Gossip almost always moves through a small number of repeat carriers. The same one or two people who are plugged into every conversation, who always seem to know things first, who become the connector between departments without anyone officially giving them that role. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to accuse them. You just need to notice who they are and quietly stop handing them material. Stop venting to them. Stop sharing what's actually going on in your life. Not out of paranoia, just out of awareness that whatever you say to that person tends to travel further than you'd expect. That single adjustment does more to slow a rumor down than any denial you could ever give. And this is where the real long-term move comes in. Because it's not about winning one rumor. It's about how you're generally read over time. If you have done this before, if you've gotten defensive, argued your case loudly, tried to control the narrative in real time, you need to hear this carefully. You probably didn't ruin anything permanently. Most situations like this are recoverable. But the pattern matters more than any single moment. And if it keeps happening, that's when it stops being a rough week and starts being how that person handles pressure. So how do you actually know if this has gone from normal office friction into something that's actually affecting your standing? I want to be careful with this part because you can't see everything that happens behind the scenes. And I don't want you diagnosing every awkward interaction as a conspiracy. One weird moment means almost nothing. A repeated pattern is what actually matters. Here's what's worth paying attention to. People who were previously warm towards you suddenly getting cooler without an obvious reason. Getting quietly left out of casual information that used to reach you naturally. The kind of thing you used to hear in passing that you now only find out about after the fact. A manager's tone shifting in a way you can't explain from anything you actually did differently. Being asked to explain something you never brought up yourself, which usually means someone else already framed the story before you had a chance to shape it. Getting left off an invite or a thread you would normally be included in, with no real explanation given. None of this proves anything on its own. Any one of these could just be a busy week or coincidence. But if you're noticing 2 or 3 of these stacking up around the same time, that's usually not random. And it's worth paying attention to rather than panicking over. Here's the good news, and this is genuinely the good news. Almost all of this is preventable, and most of it is controllable, even though the gossip itself never was. You cannot stop people from talking. I want to be honest about that up front, because I'm not going to pretend there's a trick that makes office gossip disappear entirely. What you can control is how much fuel you're supplying and who you're supplying it to. Start by tightening what you share with people who talk a lot. Not shutting everyone out, just being aware that certain people function as broadcast systems, whether they mean to or not. Keep showing up consistent. Consistent is what removes the reactive story people love to tell about someone going through something hard. Never litigate a rumor in a group setting, because that almost always spreads it further instead of shutting it down. If you genuinely need to address something, do it privately, briefly, and only with someone who actually has influence over how the situation gets read, not with everyone who happened to hear a version of it. Give it time. This is the part people hate hearing, because everyone wants gossip to end immediately. It doesn't work that way. Stories fade because nothing new is being added to them, and that takes longer than people want it to. If you're 2 weeks into staying quiet and it feels like nothing has changed, that's normal, not a sign that the approach isn't working. Most of this fades in a slow, boring way, not a dramatic one. Be a little more careful, for a while, about what you say to people who talk a lot, even if they mean well. Not forever, just until the current story has had time to run out of oxygen. If you have to interact with the person who started it, keep it professional and short. Don't perform friendliness, and don't perform coldness either. Both of those give people something new to read into. And accept, honestly, that some of this was never going to be fair. Some people are going to think what they think. You are not going to convert every person in that office into someone who has the full, accurate picture of your life. That was never actually the goal. The goal is making sure the story stops being interesting and letting your actual behavior become the newer, more boring, more accurate version that eventually replaces it. So here's where this actually lands. Can you destroy office gossip without opening your mouth? Yes, this is real. Just not in the dramatic way the title probably made you picture. It's not a clever comeback. It's not one perfect conversation that shuts everyone up. It's not silence because you have nothing to say. It's starvation. It's consistency. It's being aware of who's actually carrying the story and quietly cutting off their supply. The system is unfair sometimes. People will judge you off half a story more often than you'd like. But the part you actually control is how much you feed it and how steady you look while it runs its course. Be selective about what you share and who you share it with. Stay consistent, especially when it's uncomfortable. Let the story run out of oxygen instead of trying to argue it into silence. And remember that every version of you that reacts becomes part of what people remember, long after they've forgotten what started it in the first place. If you've ever had a manager quietly take a side in something like this without ever saying it out loud, that's actually a different mechanism, and it's worth understanding on its own. I'll get into that one next. Drop a comment if you've lived through something like this. I read them, and some of the most useful things I've learned about how this actually plays out came from people telling me their version of it.